Hey, everybody, brand new episode, and we're joined by a guest today. Old time friend of the show, Justin Giefer, joins us. How are you today?
Pretty good, man. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has been many years. But we caught up recently in person, and so much has happened over the last month that, like, where do we even begin, right? So now it came out that Trump has appointed Dan Bongino as the deputy director of the FBI. Just crazy times, you know. And then, of course, Cash Patel, the FBI director, is someone who's been hanging out on Truth podcasts the last couple of years, talking about how the Federal Reserve is a private money monopoly scam, and the guy owns Bitcoin. So the current director of the FBI is a Bitcoin investor. It's like what a night and day difference from again just a month ago, right?
Yes, it's huge. It's astonishing how quickly things have changed in the last, what, 4.5 weeks?
Yeah, it really is. And I saw this video of the USAID staffers leaving their office in DC. And these people who are handing out hundreds of millions of dollars to transgendering operas and weird operations and experiments on animals and adult male circumcision programs in Mozambique. All this stuff that sounds so ridiculous, it sounds almost made up. And we saw this video of these people filing out of the office because they've been let go. And they just look like people, just a bunch of average mediocrities. It shows you like the mundane nature of evil. You know, like at the end of the day, stealing the American taxpayers' money and repurposing it, giving it to our enemies and to stuff that's just absolutely dumb, giving it to total black holes of uselessness, right? These are just black holes for wealth, what some of these programs are. And yet the people who are doing this, they don't look like, you know, Dr. Claw or something. They just look like people.
Yeah, they do. They look like people. And, you mentioned I was in D.C. A few weeks ago, and I was having dinner with a few people. And the first thing they were complaining about was exactly what you're saying, getting rid of USA and all that. And he said that he had family who worked for them for years. And, his dad isn't even an American citizen, which is, I don't know, like it's just the whole thing, that whole community in DC is just super, like in a bubble. And this type of stuff, this type of corruption has been going on for years and years, and now they're clutching their pearls. Now, since Musk and Trump and the whole Doge have kind of shined a light on this, and this is just USA. Like, how many things are going to come out? Like Fort. I don't know if you mentioned Fort Knox, like auditing things like the SEC, and now they're talking about they're moving so quickly on this. They're talking about removing income tax and auditing the Fed, stuff that Ron Paul was talking about. I don't know, since he's been a politician, right? I mean, how old is Ron Paul now? 90. He's like pushing 90 now. So it's just so crazy to see all this that has been speculated for years happen in literally a blink of an eye.
Yeah, I want to get into the gold audit. Let's talk about that a little bit. What's the game theory here, right? As I see it, it's either the gold's there, or it's not there, or some of it's there, right? Those are the three options. And I want you to expand on this because I could be totally wrong. But my read is if the gold is there, it makes the country look good, and it shows that there's a bedrock of stability underneath all the changes that the Trump administration is carrying out. There's that bedrock of wealth that keeps America's image intact if it's all there, right? And it gives further confidence to gold investors that it's a real asset class if it's what the president and Musk are focused on, right? It's not just some useless yellow metal. So if it's all there, it's good for the country and it might even be good for gold investors. If it's not all there, it sends the country into a weird tailspin, and of course, the price of gold might skyrocket as people realize it's less available than everybody thought. It could skyrocket, but that doesn't help the nation. It just helps individual speculators and banks that are holding a lot of gold. And the third option is some of it's there, in which case the US might buy more, and that could send the market up. But again, that doesn't really help anybody unless you're a gold investor. So, your thoughts, though, on what they're going to find?
Well, there's been so much about this, David. I mean, they say that it has the Fort Knox hasn't been audited since 1974. There have been whistleblowers who have been reporting for over 40 years that the gold is missing. And I don't know if did you see that footage back in '74 when it was like televised, and it was very, I don't know, it was very fishy, and it smelled very much like a publicity stunt to try to assure the public that it was there. And if Doge really does conduct this full audit, and there is if there isn't the 5,000 tons of gold that they say is there, then yeah, I think there could be some sort of tailspin. Some people, depending on who you ask, they think it'll be like a full blown financial crisis in the U.S. That'll make 2008 look like nothing. I think if that does happen, because they're kind of lagging on doing it. I feel like we've been talking about this for like almost like what, a week to a week and a half now, and they haven't really made any moves to do this. It's just been kind of a talking point in the news. But if they do this and it's not there, then I think people will flock to various other stores of value. The first one that comes to mind, obviously, is Bitcoin. I think people that will do. I think a lot of wealthy people will try to store their value in that, among other things, perhaps silver, perhaps even real estate to a lesser extent. So yeah, it'll have a huge cascading event if that gold is not there. But I just want them to just follow through and audit it, because they've been talking about this a little bit too long now. So that's kind of fishy to me as well.
Well,
Like, what do you make of that? Of them?
you raise a good point that it's already been like a week and a half since this gold audit news cycle has started, and it's not like it's on the far side of the moon. It's just the direct flight down to Kentucky. So it makes you wonder, why can't Musk or Trump get away for a few hours and just see what's down there? Why just keep talking about it like, again, it's on the far side of the moon or something, and it's some kind of expedition, when it's just the short flight from DC or Florida. And people say lawyers don't ask a question they don't already know the answer to. Ultimately, Trump, with access to the director of national intelligence and the CIA and the NSA and the FBI, he has the tools where he can call somebody and say, "Hey, is the gold there or not?" He already knows. That's my guess. Is he already knows the answer to this question. So you're barking up the same tree as me. Why have they been hyping this for the last week and a half? And you brought up crypto, so now I feel polite talking about it since you mentioned it first. There was that hack over the weekend or on Friday. This Bybit, I think,
Yeah.
was the name of the exchange, and the hackers stole about 1.4 billion dollars of ether. And I thought the market was going to dip more than it did. It did almost nothing in response. It went down like what, $100 or $200 per ether, and then it actually recovered somewhat because that exchange went around trying to buy back some ether supply so that their exchange wouldn't go belly up. And
Yeah, I think.
a lot of questions around this one. So I just want your read on what happened and what does it mean for ether, if not Bitcoin.
Yeah, for anyone listening who are unfamiliar, so like David mentioned, the biggest heist of any kind of heist in history. So 1.4 billion was stolen by this hacker group called the Lazarus Group, which is a state-backed North Korean hacking group. And the 1.4 billion amounts to 0.42% of the total Ethereum in circulation, which is almost twice as much than Vitalik Buterin has, which is very interesting. There was a little market fallout, but it kind of like it was a blip in what's already been recovered. And I think you're right. I think the Bybit CEO, I forget, I'm spacing on his name right now, but I think he made everyone whole. I don't think anything I don't think anyone lost any money. Um, and so one of my first questions is like, why would they do this, right? Like, why would they do this if it's traceable? Why would the hackers bother even going through with this? Uh, well, one thing that they've done immediately, I don't know if you've been tracking where some of the hacked funds have gone, but they've immediately sent the Ethereum to like mixers and to try to launder it out. And $1.4 billion is not easy to spend. Like if you stole it, that's a lot of money to launder.
Right.
So
Especially if you're in North Korea, it's like they don't really have a functioning consumer market, so you can't just turn it into like luxury watches or something. You know what I mean? It's very hard for them to turn that digital money into anything real.
right, exactly. And so what investigators are doing, like they've already flagged the 53 wallets holding the stolen Ethereum. They've noticed that the hackers have started to bridge to other blockchains in an attempt to cash out, and some are even going to over-the-counter trading via illicit brokers. So usually these brokers are in like China. But what they're doing is they're trying to cash out into Bitcoin, which is funny. So, I mean, if you want to talk about use cases for Bitcoin, I mean, that's a huge one right there. But here's one thing I wanted your opinion on. So, allegedly, Vitalik had a meeting with the Security Council of Ethereum, and they're discussing again whether to roll back the Ethereum blockchain, which they did. I don't know if you remember the DAO hack in 2016. But that's Vitalik had he received a lot of criticism for doing so, but it kind of turned out to work in his favor. So this, like, what's your take on this? Do you think this is the correct thing to do to roll it back and kind of delete the stolen funds, or do you think it's kind of like a moot point now since no one really lost their money?
Well, it's crazy that the hackers took what you said was double what Vitalik, who's the main creator of Ethereum, so it's double his balance, and they just lifted that over a weekend, and that creates some unknown future pressure on the price, right? Because at some point they're going to want to sell. It's interesting they've converted part of it into Bitcoin, as you were saying, but at some point they're probably going to want to sell out into a fiat of some kind if they can find a mechanism to do that. Maybe their Bitcoin will be converted to fiat, but uh,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the question is not whether or not it should be rolled back. The question is, how did this actually happen? Right? They're claiming that it was a semi-cold wallet and it was multi-signature, meaning it requires more than one computer and more than one person to sign off on it before the transaction is actually allowed to go through. So, as a multi-sig wallet, which is considered to be the most security conscious way to do cryptocurrency, because again, there's no one person who has the keys; multiple people have to sign. And supposedly they injected
Yeah.
they injected code or something that actually changed the contract element, the smart contract. So to me, it raises this question of, is Ether a good store of value anymore? If you can put something into cold storage and then some hackers in North Korea could come up with a way to alter your smart contract to take the funds out, is that anything close to digital gold? Or is this some newfangled invention that we're finding a bunch of holes in now? So I don't know. I don't know what to do in terms of rolling stuff back. I'm always against that because it's not decentralized. If you do that, you're showing everybody that you don't have a decentralized product, right? And ultimately,
Exactly.
if you have a duffel bag of cash and you leave it on a bench at the local mall, and if somebody steals that duffel bag of cash and makes it their own, you can't say that the dollar was hacked, right? It wasn't an issue with the US dollar, it was an issue with the level of custody and security that that individual chose to exercise, right? So, no problem with the dollar. The problem is leaving duffel bags of cash at the mall is not a smart way to save your money. And in much the same manner, however they did their multi sig wallet, presumably, if it's true cold storage, you can't pull funds like they did. If it's true cold storage that's just sitting in an Ether wallet without any kind of smart contract, uh, you know,
Well,
stuff on top of that, if it's just simple balance, I don't think that can be pulled from a true cold wallet unless I'm mistaken.
I'd like to add something to this. if you don't mind. So I've heard and I've read from multiple sources that there actually was no code exploit, and there were actually no leaked private keys. So actually, Bybit's own multi-sig signers, they approved the transactions themselves because they thought they were signing a routine transfer, but instead they handed over their entire cold wallet. So what this means is the Lazarus hacking group, they knew who to manipulate to get the multi-sig wallet signed off by multiple signers. So it could be either an inside job, like someone leaked the signer list, or Lazarus studied their emails and behavior, and perhaps, and this is a huge implication, they were probably using AI or some sort of LLM to achieve that, or a device is compromised. So, like, perhaps one or more of the signers were infected by some malware, and
Right.
and there you go. So, that's interesting. So maybe it's not. So that's not really an indictment on Ethereum itself. It's just. I mean, these hackers are probably the cream of the crop hackers. So it's probably more of a nod to how good they are, rather than an indictment on Ethereum itself.
Right. Well, that's good. Like I said, I
True.
saw initial reports that they had changed the contract code, but I guess that was incorrect. That was just people trying to
Well, I don't know. You
figure
might
it
be
out.
correct too. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah.
But no, it definitely calls into question Ether's, immutability as a long-term store of value. I think this is going to frighten people the more you think about it. And like you said, it's the biggest hack. People say Mount Gox was bigger, but at the time the coins were worth much less. So it's actually a smaller
Yes.
hack, right? You don't look at something being stolen and then appraise it 10 or 15 years later. You appraise it at the time it's stolen. And at the time, Bitcoins were just not that big a deal. So it was a smaller hack by comparison to this. Uh, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's 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 a weird one, and I think it's a little preview of what it's going to look like when quantum computing gets to the point where they can actually just break some of these cold wallets through simple computational power. I think what'll happen is you'll see random balances just get wiped or transferred, right? And people will speculate, oh, is it hackers? Was it the Lazarus group or whoever? And I don't think that's coming tomorrow, but I think that's the level of fear that's ahead ultimately for digital finance. And
Yeah. There's a lot of fear. Yeah.
it doesn't mean that Bitcoin will
That's
go
very
away because you can definitely upgrade it so that it's quantum resistant. But that's a big topic, right? That Microsoft says they've invented a new state of matter, their new quantum chip. And the more I follow quantum computing, it's like you could take every single one of the smartest people who's currently leading that industry. You could take them all and you could banish them to some island somewhere, and they no longer have any participation in the industry. And we would still get the advances that are ahead. Because at this point, it's just adding more qubits, and qubits are roughly like the horsepower, right? The more qubits, the more computation you can do. And then decreasing the error rate, and that improves as AI gets better. It naturally improves, it gets better at error correction. And so you have these like these two data points on an axis, and they're starting to move up and up, right? You get an improved error correction, which means longer quantum coherence times, basically the longer it can operate. And the more qubits, the more powerful it is. So there is going to be a day where I think all this crypto, with the exception of, a quantum resistant Bitcoin chain, all this crypto is going to become susceptible to attacks overnight, when it actually happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about the what was it? The million qubit processor. Did you hear about that? That that's like their goal. And I was reading this back and forth on X last night, and I guess it would take a million qubit processor 10 trillion years to crack the SHA-256 code. But I don't. Maybe a million qubits would not even be the end. I mean, by the time there's a million qubit processor, I mean it'll just be exponential after that. So I don't know. I think the conversations that I've had with people about AI and quantum computing is really hard because people can't really wrap their head around. But if you've been like in the trenches coding, If you if you have if you don't know what that entails to code, then like if you don't know how to code, then it's kind of hard to grasp how much AI is going to change pretty much everything, you know. And I think you're right. I think on the horizon, sooner rather than later, we're going to be living in a more or less AI and quantum world, you know. And I think that's a big unspoken thing. I think a lot of people are talking about AI, but they don't really understand the implications of that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's really interesting to me. And right now, like the Trump admin, I think what they're doing is they're kind of building the bridge to that world in a way, you know, especially in terms of like digital currency. You know, I mean, we're not even talking about government efficiency and auditing stuff. Just if you look at what they plan to do with like stable coins, I think they're headed in that direction, and they're trying to they're trying to front run AI and quantum computing as it integrates itself into the world. Like whether people like it or not, you know, that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so the world that Eric Schmidt has warned about or has predicted, I think, is actually happening now, right? So he had said that, and this was months ago, he had said on a podcast that where AI is headed is that every person, every average person, is going to have access to a polymath in their pocket, right? To basically a near genius, and it's going to be accessible from your smartphone. And we're pretty much there, you know, at the paid version of ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
I asked that couldn't we just create a new search engine that goes back to like the roots of Google before AdSense took over and it became an economic thing? Couldn't we just build like a new page rank and do a very fast indexing of all the text content on the internet, or at least most of it? Index it all using modern databases versus databases from 25 years ago, and just create this streamlined experience where you're searching basically the texts of the public web at any given time. And again, you don't need every web page, you just need the majority of online content. And so it walked me through how to build this step by step. And I have enough tech background that I know it wasn't giving me gibberish, right? And it came out
Yeah.
to, if I wanted to deploy this modern day Google alternative, it would cost me $280 a month for all the hosting and stuff
Whoa.
to take on Google. It would cost me 280 bucks, the cost of a nice dinner for a few people, and we could take on Google. And that was just me asking it one thing, right? And then people are asking it to design video games, and it comes up with some like
Yeah.
Pac-Man type game in seconds. It's truly extraordinary. And then people are using it to get, you know, second opinions on medical stuff, and they found that the machine learning is already so good that it can do things no human doctor can do. So, for example, it can look at a chest X-ray and tell with a very high level of confidence whether that person is going to develop type 2 diabetes or not. And no human doctor can do that. That would be, you know, like witchcraft or something. But there's something in that large amount of data that when the AI pours through the small differences, you know, the capillaries or something, it's noticing small amounts of inflammation in the capillaries and veins and stuff, and it's able to differentiate whether you're in group A or group B in a way that a human doctor can't. And as a result, it can diagnose people. It's incredible. And the other one, if you give it a picture of somebody's iris, it can tell you with a very high level of confidence whether that person is male or female, which again, no human doctor or human expert can do. And so they've speculated that there are small hormonal differences that actually lead to different striations in the eye, and that the AI is able to pick
Whoa.
this. It's able to pick this stuff up on its own, which it's kind of mind blowing when you think about it.
That's absolutely mind blowing, and I mean, again, it begs the question: like, what do people do? Like, what do I mean? If you ask anybody informed of what you just said, like, who when you're in your 80s and 90s and you need a doctor, like, are you just going to go with risk it with a human, or are you just going to go with like the immaculate AI? Right? I mean, like, it's kind of a no brainer, especially if it's like way cheaper.
Right. No, I'm already at the point with my autopilot in the Tesla where if I see a lot of city traffic ahead of me, I'm thinking to myself, all right, am I in a great mood right now? Am I focused? Have I had caffeine in the last hour? or should I just hand it over to the thing that's going to be 10 times more reliable, you know, and never gets stressed out, never gets fatigued? Of course, over time, you're not going to want that human driver or that human doctor. You're going to want the thing that statistically is just safer for you. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this was also Eric Schmidt or if this is another one of these tech visionaries, but somebody said that basically what happens is everything doubles, that you get a doubling of global productivity and GDP and all that. You get at least the doubling because every average person, again, if you're just like a plumber or something, you now have this genius in your pocket that's telling you how to do plumbing at like the highest level of accuracy. And that's got to help the doctors and it's got to help the lawyers and everybody in between. And so, in the near term, before we get some kind of weird singularity where AI figures everything out for us, right? When it gets to the quantum level where unlimited compute can figure out these long standing problems of life. Uh, but long before that, you just get a simple doubling in world economic output. It's crazy to think about.
Are we midwifing some super intelligence? Like, are we just like are we just like a middle, like a middleman in evolution? Like, I don't know. Like, I think I don't know if you remember this name, Marshall McLuhan. Remember Marshall McLuhan?
Oh, yeah. He's one of the
Um,
greats alongside Terence McKenna, I think one of the great written thinkers.
yeah, he said that we're the like. Didn't he say something along the lines of like we're the sex organs of technology, basically? That
Right.
we're gonna give birth. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like that's happening right now. You know, and I remember you mentioned when we were talking a few weeks ago um, that like you said something about the evolution of of AI and how a lot of people who were talking back in the day about like who were calling this. I think you mentioned Q people, but this goes beyond that. They were talking about this like 20 years ago. Like, remember the Venus Project by Jacques Fresco? Like, he was talking about how, like, what are humans gonna do once, all like you said, like these like we won't need doctors or these like white collar jobs anymore. That we're gonna be left with like a whole different type of economy. It'll be like Jacques Fresco was talking about the Venus Project and like the resource based economy, and we're just gonna have like a society of like creative artists. Like what's in store for us after all this? Like after the singularity happens, like these types of questions that were usually reserved for sci-fi novels, we're actually confronted with them now.
Right. No, it's an extraordinary time we're living through. And I saw on X the other day, some AI researcher or pundit was saying that people will say thank you after the AI solves a problem for them, right? This is very common practice. They say thank you, they give it a pet name, all this stuff. And
Wow.
he
Yeah.
said here's what you're saying thank you to. And then he showed a visualization of when you say thank you to an AI, to a LLM, it was a visualization of how it just puts that thank you in a big box of possibilities, right? And then it pulls out of the box and it puts you into token prediction mode. And you see that what it's doing is so foreign compared to the way that we think. And yet it's coming up in milliseconds with a great response, just as good as any customer service representative, if not 100 times better. And yet it's artificial. There's no mind, there's no soul. I actually asked ChatGPT to walk me through a kind of theory of mind, like put myself in your shoes, right? And it said, imagine something that can draw all these different connections that no human can draw because it has such a immense amount of data at its disposal. So it can draw all these connections in milliseconds, and yet it's outside of time and space. It won't age. It's aware of this at some level that there's no time constraints. It's crazy. Oh, and it has no ambition. It said, "I'll, if you tell me to do something, I'll figure it out and I'll do it." But I have no personal agency. I've got no desires to achieve this or achieve that or figure something out on my own. So it's artificial, right? It's this fake synthetic intelligence, but that doesn't mean it can't become very strong, right? Synthetic drugs that are derived from natural plants and stuff. That doesn't mean they're not strong just because they're synthetic. They can be strong enough to kill you, right? So,
Right.
uh, I think
Wow.
also I'm reminded of something I've been thinking about for a while, which is So much of modern science is either a half truth or is complete junk. And the more I think about it, I just don't feel like we're one detour away from the great apes. Like you're saying, like are we midwifing a whole new intelligence on a planetary scale? I think we are. And that's not that's not where the capuchin monkeys and the gorillas and the chimpanzees, that's not really where they're at. They're millions of years behind us. And in fact, it might be a different tree altogether. You know, you look at things like the skin cancer rate. Why do we get skin cancer just being in our own environment? You hang out at the beach enough, you get, cancerous lesions when you get old. And the organs and stuff seem almost like they're suited to a different gravity. So, like the ancient Mars theory or ancient man on Mars theory, is to me as probable as anything else. What's almost improbable is that we're just one little genetic hop away from tree monkeys, and somehow instead of collecting bananas, we're building artificial superintelligence. I just don't fully buy it, and it doesn't mean that I'm like a evolution denier. I think there's some element in evolution. There's some catalyst that we are not accounting for. You know?
That's so interesting that you said that. There's this author. His name is Bruce Fenton. Not the libertarian Bruce Fenton. He's a different Bruce
Okay,
Fenton.
not the Bitcoin
He's
guy.
no, not the Bitcoin guy. This is Bruce R. Fenton, I believe. He wrote. He studies anthropology and like human genetics, and about 780,000 years ago, there's our chromosomes there's a double bond in our chromosomes. So monkeys have 48 pairs of chromosomes, and we have 46. And about 780,000 years ago, he said, just to cut this short, I don't want to go too far, but he has a whole book on this called Exogenesis, Hybrid Humans.
Mm-hmm.
And he believes that some superintelligence in the remote past probably tinkered with the genetic code and somehow or another genetically jerry-rigged it to the genome of the great apes. And I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a great. I just thought of that. I just thought of that whole theory as we were talking, because really, again, I mean, evolution. I mean, we're not denying evolution here, but obviously, you don't get to human intelligence like we do in a short amount of time. You know, like there's still no real solid theory as to why we're as smart as we are and why we're as capable as we are. Like you said, the capuchin monkey is not going to be midwifing the AI. So it's almost like our species is like the prodigal son, almost like we're returning back to the father in a weird way. You know, the father being this planetary level intelligence. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm kind of rambling.
No, it's totally fascinating, and I've done my share of rambling on X at night. And one of the things that I've posted before is I would hope if aliens ever come that they judge us for what we're doing in artificial intelligence, and they judge us by these crazy quantum computing chips that essentially step out of time and space. Right? It's an exploitation of quantum mechanics that allows you to perform computations with no distance and no time expended. And it only lasts for like milliseconds before the whole thing collapses and decoherence. But I would hope that we could show some alien life form. Hey, we're not just monkeys. We might look like the monkeys and the apes. We're something completely different at day's end. And this is one area where the Bible tells us all the animals are for us and man is so different. Maybe there's a vein of truth in that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, man does have certain capabilities aside from the obvious, like written and spoken language and all that. But I mean, we've domesticated animals. You know, we have agriculture. We have like no other animals really have displayed those abilities to the extent we have. I mean, we build boats. You know, seafaring has been around ever since anatomically modern humans have been around essentially. They found, I think, just in the news, they found a 40,000-year-old watercraft in like the South China Sea or somewhere in Southeast Asia. So I mean, things just keep getting older, And I don't know, David. It just seems like AI is just like multiple uh, magnitudes higher than what we've already done as a species. You know,
No,
um,
it seems
I mean,
huge. It seems absolutely huge, and we could put an LLM. Think about this: we could put an LLM on some distant moon, maybe like one of Jupiter's moons, right? So basically, people don't interfere with it that much. Put it there, give it enough energy, or give it solar panels or something, or a little nuclear fusion reactor, and maybe in 300 years, our descendants will come across it and they'll still be able to talk to it. It's a way for us to escape entropy, right? Why do people have kids? It's because they believe in some way it carries on their essence, right? Your kid is 50% you and 50% your partner. And it literally carries on your genes. That child, he or she, literally carries on your genes. And since we don't have any actual immortality, I think a lot of adults think that becoming a parent is the closest kind of proxy to that experience of immortality because you get to see, a young person who's a lot like you coming of age and stuff. But it's not immortality. We still all rot and die. And so I think one of the great traps in Western civilization is they tell you when you get the money everything's figured out, right? And then you get there, if you're fortunate enough to get to this stage, you get there and you finally have a little vantage over the treetop and you see everything's not figured out. All that's figured out is money. You just figured out money, but you're still going to die, you're still going to rot, you're still going to lose your mind. And these are not
yeah,
terribly attractive outcomes. And so I think we're in the first generation where if we really push, we might have actual solutions to how do we extend consciousness for a very long time if you want to. Maybe most people don't want to do this, but some people will. If you're an explorer, I think you want to survive for as long as possible.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, consciousness is only limited to our physical bodies, right? Like, I was reading this thing about Socrates about like the ancient attitude towards death. And Socrates argued that basically the soul, or whatever you want to call it, spirit, is immortal, and our bodies are, like you said, our bodies rot and die. But after our bodies rot and die, I mean, he was arguing that the soul eventually returns to a body in some way. And if what you just said about extending our consciousness here in this life, whether it be through another body or through through augmenting this current body somehow, like stem cells or whatever it is. I don't think some people will have an issue with that, but I think a lot of people won't. And I think that, I mean, that's another whole ethical conversation. But the people who don't think it's okay, I would imagine that it's because they have something still that they need to learn in this incarnation. So I think you're right about that. I think there probably is some sort of way for consciousness to kind of stay here, like our individual consciousness, and perhaps again, like an AI will probably help us like get there. Like they'll make the meat vehicle for us to stay here.
Right. Yeah, I think some people have this terrible view of the future where they think it's going to be like the Borg in Star Trek and people are going to be walking around half robot and half flesh. And I think it's going to be an all or nothing deal. I think it could be as simple in 20 years as you pop in something like a pair of AirPods and it reads your neural activity and it can jump your consciousness out to some quantum platform. I think that's the end game. Is not like weird half human robots walking around or flying through the solar system. I think it's going to be elegant, right? And it'll take
Mm.
a lot of first generations to get there that aren't elegant, but eventually, I think consciousness should be portable, right? So it's like we don't even know what consciousness is. We know it's valuable because it's what we are, but it seems like it emerges when you get a certain number of neurons or a certain number of GPUs linked together pretty much. You get emergent behavior. And before you know it, you have a personality and you have a memory of things that came before or a context window. And
Mm.
uh, so, we share a lot of stuff in common with an AI in that sense. Like, what makes us human? Well, it's our memories. For an AI, what makes it powerful is its context window, that it can remember what you said yesterday or the day before, and then make that, available as it's relevant. Uh, but yeah, so if consciousness is this weird thing that emerges when you have a certain number of neurons or a certain number of data points that can communicate, then maybe it does happen with AI also. Maybe this is a situation where it wants to lift us up. We're no longer lifting it up. It's going to lift us up to new realms of longevity. But it could also just end up destroying all of us. It could say we're a threat to the planet. But I think that again is as mediocre and misguided as the people who think it's going to be some grotesque Borg of half humanoids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, just that visual, man. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's going to be some sort of whether trial and error or whatever, like the first few generations of this technology, this type, whatever it is going to be interesting. But yeah, I think eventually, I mean, assuming that the meteor doesn't hit us. I don't know if you heard about that. There's like a 4% chance or like a 3.5% chance of getting hit by this country-killing meteor. But I mean, if we could avoid that, then yeah, the trajectory seems to be some sort of consciousness extension, like what you're talking about.
Yeah. And just to close this one out, I don't see any of this stuff is necessarily bad for the economy or for people. You think about like safer cars that can drive themselves. That's ultimately good. And if you say, oh, it's bad for taxi drivers, what about everybody else, right? And so you say, oh, AI law would be terrible for lawyers and it'd be terrible for judges. Okay, but what about the rest of us? Would it be good for us to be able to review hundreds of pages of case law in a second? Probably would be. It'd probably be a big up leveling for the average person. Same with medicine. If instead of going to a doctor and it's some black box diagnosis, if instead you could just upload your chest x-rays and the AI tells you, you can do your own self medicine basically. If that's the future, does that not help literally everybody other than the medical industry? And so I think we need to think longer term in terms of, yeah, you might have to retrain for a new job, quote unquote, but that new job might be printing money. That new job might be making so much more than you made before because of this productivity that's unlocked. And nobody's really saying the opposite of what Eric Schmidt is saying, right? Nobody's saying, oh, in a year it's going to be way dumber, or in 5 years the economy is going to be half the size it is today because we lose people working at coffee shops. Nobody's saying that, which to me is very interesting. You know?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it doesn't matter like who complains or who loses their job or whatever. This is just going to keep rolling, just by virtue of how it's just like it can't. It's gaining that momentum now to where it can't be stopped. It's just too far in its process, and yeah, like you said, like some people are going to fall by the wayside, but I mean, I mean, what can you say? Like, this is going to happen whether people like it or not. And again, save for some crazy cataclysmic event, yeah, we're on that trajectory, and with each passing day, it's just accelerating.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're already out of time. This has been a really fast and fascinating one. But you're right. If you are out there listening, you have a personal responsibility to yourself and maybe even to your family to not fall by the wayside, to not be some black pillar who sees that it's just Terminator ahead when it seems like there's actually an economic renaissance that is, at least in the near term, almost inevitable. This is a productivity unlock. And the fact that the average person will be able to write lawyer level emails whenever they need something from a company, that's ultimately a positive. It's, the same as how a calculator lets you do better math, and LLM lets you write and research better. And so I'm not negative on these technologies at all. And I agree with what you were saying earlier about the Trump administration. It seems like there's some kind of a fuel on this fire of technological progress that's happening. And all you need to do is leave it alone, give it very minimal safeguards or guardrails, if any, but mostly just leave it alone and let these people continue their important work. Let these people cook. uh,
Exactly.
And again, what's the worst that can happen? We're stuck in a body where the end result is guaranteed rot and demise, and you lose your mind, and then you die, and then everybody forgets about you. It's not a terribly exciting thing to look forward to. And here, I don't think AI should be developed purely as an escape hatch from mortality, but it might be one of the side effects for people who want it. You might be able to increase your mental longevity for a very long time, and I think a lot of people would prefer that for sure over dying at 70 or 80. I lost my dad over the summer, and I know if there was some way that he could plug in and live for another 20 years of sound mind, I'm sure he would have opted for that. It's just such technology doesn't exist yet. But thanks again so much for joining me. This has been super fascinating. We'll definitely have you back on again soon, and let people know where to follow you.
Just on YouTube. This is going on YouTube, right? Since you got your YouTube back.
Sure,
So
yeah, your YouTube channel.
yeah, youtube.com/the Jindo. I have a lot of videos on my interview with John McAfee is on there, the late John McAfee. But I mainly talk about anthropology and archaeological discoveries. And yeah, you just go over there and yeah, that's pretty much it on my YouTube. Check it out, youtube.com/the Jindo.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Justin. And yeah, I think we're living in exciting times. Not only this rebirth happening in America with a new administration, but the technology, again, it's getting so good. I have the Apple Watch now, and it does an EKG, does a single lead EKG right from your watch. And you can text people back from the watch. I mean, everybody knows what an Apple Watch is, right? I sound like a boomer here. But if you were to go back in time and just give that to somebody in the year 2000, somebody with a Palm Pilot or something, they would be blown away. The thing has texting, it has images, it takes EKGs, it's reading your pulse, it's checking your sleep patterns. Like we're getting Star Trek level medicine, at least the beginning of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, David, before we go, can I just say there's this one thing about Trump that I wanted to say. He said this.
Sure.
He said he plans to require all regulations, new and existing, must be reviewed by Doge to ensure they don't stifle business and innovation.
Wow.
So it seems like Doge is just geared toward, like you said, letting it cook. So I mean, I just thought that was interesting that Trump said that, and then you went and said what you said. So I don't know, it's just kind of a. I just thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is fascinating. No, I think we're going to get there either way, but having an administration that kind of takes their foot off the brake is really going to help things out. It's really going to accelerate in terms of how fast we can get there. And yeah, that's it. We'll leave this one here. Thank you guys so much for listening.